Welcome, everyone. Today's conversation feels especially close to my heart. I'm joined by Dr. Juliette Galbraith and Dr. Tracy Levitt, two physician coaches and moms who understand what it means to carry the weight of a high pressure profession while raising a family and trying to stay connected to who you are in the process. Like me, they know this life from the inside. They lived the invisible load, the constant pull between work and home, and the feeling of being incredibly capable, yet utterly exhausted. Together, they created Physician Life Booster, a group coaching community intentionally designed to support physician moms in building lives that feel more balanced, sustainable, and fulfilling without asking them to sacrifice more time, energy, or money. As a former litigator of 20 years and a mom of 3, I see so many parallels between the experiences of physicians, attorneys, and women in other high-stress roles. While the details may differ, the nervous system load, the pressure, and the longing for support are remarkably similar. Today's conversation is honest, grounding, and deeply validating. We'll talk about their journeys, the power of group support, and what becomes possible when women realize they're not alone and they don't have to do this the hard way. So welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
So happy to have you both here with me.
Happy to be
So
here.
thank you. So Juliette, I will begin with you. And if you could share a bit about your journey, both professionally and personally, and what led you to this work.
Sure. I will try to make it succinct. Um, I am a psychiatrist by training, and I was in academic medicine for about 2 decades. I have two daughters who are older teens, and I'm married to a non-physician, and had them during sort of the end of my training and beginning of my career. Um, and did a lot of different things in my career. Was hospital based, ended up doing a lot of clinical leadership, taking on increasing roles in a big health system, and loved parts of it and did not love other parts of it. But, sort of naturally gravitated towards it, and got to about midlife, as we do, as I think a lot of women do, and started sort of questioning whether this was the chapter I wanted to have for the next half, I guess, of my career and my life, and whether there wasn't something else in some other way that I really wanted to sort of be in this space and give back, but in a different way that allowed me to feel a little bit more aligned with myself and who I was. And I sort of went back and looked at things I had been interested in very early, and then had sort of funneled into this medical career. And so took some time, did a lot of work on myself, did a lot of coaching, therapy, reading, all the things.
Yeah, yeah.
um, and made the decision to sort of switch chapters and begin a coaching career. I had actually thought about coaching a very long time ago, before it was really even a big thing.
Yeah.
And then sort of got into my career, and then it sort of came back in this blossom. And I just really enjoyed working with people in that way, a little bit more sort of strengths based and active, and to be a little bit more myself, and just a different way to sort of do this kind of work in helping people grow and change their lives. And ended up, I really love working with women. I love working with moms. I love working with professional women who are trying to balance everything. I had done a lot of that in mentoring trainees and young faculty throughout my career. And so this sort of felt like a natural sort of shift and extension. And so I switched into full-time coaching for primarily physicians. I do coach some
Yeah.
non-physicians, but a couple of years ago, I guess about 3 years ago. And it coincided with a time in my life when I realized my kids were not going to be home forever. They were starting to graduate high school and get into high school. And then I have aging parents who have a whole host of things and sort of
Mhm.
that classic sandwich generation, and wanting to also sort of figure out how I fit in the mix of and how I took time for them and myself and my career. And so that's sort of that's my journey in a small nutshell.
Yeah, it's a beautiful one, and it really parallels in a lot of ways what came up for me. Granted, different profession, but I, like you, for close to 2 decades, was working as a lawyer. I have three boys, and as they got older, I think that as a mom, you really start to reevaluate your life, and the demands become so full. And so it's like, how do you want to spend the moments of your life? And what came through and what you shared is that you still wanted to very much give back in the medical sector in some way, but in a way that felt more aligned with who you are and what
Yeah.
it is that you want to you know, give back, and the ways that can support you and in turn help you support others. So thank you for sharing your journey. And Tracy, can you share a bit about your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started off like full blast into medicine, studied as a pathologist, and then very unexpectedly, when I had my first child, I just felt this very strong pull to be at home. So I went back for a very short time and then kind of impulsively made the decision to fully leave medicine. One year went into the next, and I ended up spending 10 years as a stay-at-home mom, married to another physician at that time. And then when my oldest was 10, that's a daughter. I have another daughter that's 8. And then I had a baby daughter. I made the difficult decision to leave my marriage. And at that point, I was like, how am I going to support my family? Medicine, while I loved it intellectually, never quite felt like I had nailed who I was. All during my time at home, I had done a really deep dive into my personal growth, coaching, therapy, books, podcasts, all the things, with a very special interest in my parenting. I feel like I really attacked my parenting like it was a full-time job in the way that it is, but also just
Yeah.
like took that doctor energy to my home life. And so when I thought about what was the next move for me, I actually had a dear friend that was a pediatrician who was becoming a parenting coach, and she said to me, "Hey Tracy, this is kind of like what you already are for your friends," and it did really resonate with me that, yes, like medicine didn't quite feel like this is who I am, but coaching did. Um, but yet I was always so drawn to medicine and doctors. And so I was like, how can I connect these parts of myself? And so I started out just passionately wanting to help women, physicians, be parents in the way that they wanted to be. And so I started a solo practice at the time, just parent coaching physician women. And then I started realizing the need to bring women together. I had the desire to work with a wonderful partner like Juliette. And so then we came together and started our joint practice where we do group coaching for women physicians. And it's just created such a beautiful balance for me to have both my one-on-one practice where it's primarily physician women, but I also coach some men. I coach some teenagers actually. And then to have our group practice, which is all women physicians. And it's really nice when I meet the different women. I feel like I've sort of had every different chapter. I've had that fully stay-at-home mom chapter. I've had that part-time kind of juggling both. I've had full-time, sometimes even more than full-time. And I've really enjoyed every single one of them and found them equally challenging in different ways. And I realize that the grass sometimes always feels greener, but every different version of being a mom is challenging, and just really helping women find what feels right for them and how to create a life of somewhat balance, that elusive balance that everybody's looking for. So it's a real honor to do this work with other women physicians.
And I heard you say that being a parent is a full-time job, which I totally back that, but you carried like your doctor energy into it.
Mhm.
And I think it's admirable that in the midst of the speed of life, when we're pulled, by the demands of our professional lives, combined with what feels like warp speed as a parent and all that we juggle, to be able to kind of put the inner brakes on for ourselves, to slow down and to realize that something's not aligned, or something's not feeling right, and to do that deep inner work that both of you shared, that you were able to devote time to. I think that in turn allows us, in the respective work that we're doing, to really support others that much more. So when did the two of you realize that there was a real gap in support for physician moms?
Probably always. I think, a combination of along the way. I mean, certainly from my experience prior to becoming a coach, I saw it all the way along, from having been a new mom in medicine and then having been in a leadership position and having to sort of help women navigate starting families and having their career, and just how incredibly sort of challenging it can be to figure all of that out, and also isolating. Even though there are so many other women in medicine, it's sort of something that isn't always talked about, or there's still a lot of like, well, I can't admit that it's hard because then it looks like I'm not doing my job well, or I don't love being a mom every second of every day. And so I think certainly all along, and then, in the work that we both do in our individual practices, we see so many of these women one-on-one, and we really hear so many of the same thematic stories. Obviously, everybody's circumstances are unique, everybody's life stories, but part of what we really saw in coming together to form this community is, Tracy and I would joke that, like, oh, if this person could just hear this other person talking about this, they would know they're not alone. Like, we were hearing all of their stories, we were hearing all of their struggles, but they weren't hearing each other. So sort of being able to create that space, and with support and structure, that they could sort of feel the other people around them and hear other people's stories, and feel that support. But I think probably we've known it all, from our earliest days.
Like from pregnancy, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I remember having my head in the microscope and being so nauseous and pregnant, and thinking, women fought for this right, but there's no structure for like how to actually do it, and I think that the world hasn't quite caught up to what women really need to be able to balance it all. And obviously, I ended up walking away and feeling like I couldn't balance it all. And so now I really feel good about being able to go back and help women try to find that balance, because it's so, so tough. It's just, there is a huge gap in the support that women need.
It can be really difficult, and I think depending on the practice group that you're with, it can also affect how challenging or how supportive it feels. I know for myself, in the firm where I was working when I was pregnant with all three of my sons, mostly with my first and my second son. It changed a little bit when I had my third son, because there's a bigger gap between the oldest and the youngest. But I was one of just a couple other women at a huge firm who was pregnant, who was a younger mom. Most of the moms were, they had college students, or they had children who had families of their own. So there wasn't that support. And in turn, I think what you're grappling with, or what you're finding challenging in, working in a demanding sector and trying to kind of face all the things that come up during pregnancy or motherhood, that we kind of stuff it down because we're afraid in the high level work that we do that maybe we'll be perceived as not being able to be what we once were, or maybe we're not fully in it. So I think there's a bit of a stigma, and when we don't feel comfortable in our environment, to your point, Tracy, maybe if you had some support or a mentor or someone you felt like you could open up to, it would give you that inner strength and power and comfort to stay at it. So I think it's important, the environmental conditions, and to know that we're not alone. That in the programs that I offer, what meant some of them are one-on-one, but some of them are in groups. And as you're saying, if there's always this piece like, I wish they could hear what this other person is saying, because they're so aligned. It may be a specific stressor for one person, another for the other person, but the feelings and that quality of overwhelm, if they could just hear and know they're not alone, that we're all in this together. So
I think,
yeah.
Courtney, the stigma piece is really important too, because it goes both ways. So there's like the fear of the stigma that if you're not showing up at work in the right way as a woman who has children because you have a sick kid at home, or you didn't sleep last night because you have a newborn, and that's that. But you also have the societal stigma of if you're not showing up as the mom 100% either,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
very different. I think in general, it's changing a little bit, but in general, very different for men, right? There's not this like, oh, nobody asked the dad, like, oh, how dare you not go pick your sick kid up from school, or how dare you, but the mom is somehow expected to like be in both places 100% of the time. And so I think that makes it's this double-edged sword that they're always fighting against.
It so is, and this is really hitting home for me, because my youngest had a field trip, and I had this huge presentation that it just sort of fell into my lap, and I was so honored. And I noticed it was on the same date as his. They don't have that many field trips in third grade, and I'll be able to hopefully go on the next one. It comes up in the spring, but it was like, as a mom, as a working mom, that pull and that guilt. And we really do a great job, I think, at beating ourselves up, even when we're like, holding the fort up, and we do all the things, and we have dinners and lunches and breakfast made, and we're doing a great job at work. That there's this sort of like hardwiring where we can beat ourselves up as feeling like we're telling ourselves we're not doing enough in the mom role.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
what are some of the things that you see that physicians are most struggling with right now?
You want to answer, Tracy?
You can start. Go ahead. We're like, oh.
I mean, on a broad spectrum, there's the healthcare system is really struggling in general right now. So physicians of any gender, any age are really struggling, as are all healthcare providers and staff and nursing. And it's just, it was a tenuous system to begin with, and post-pandemic, it really has sort of cracked open so much of what is broken about it. And so, physicians in general are dealing with a massively sort of broken system that is sort of understaffed and overworked and sort of focused on things that make it very hard to practice medicine in a way that feels sort of morally and emotionally aligned with why a lot of people went into medicine. So I think that's the broader sort of picture that we're in right now in healthcare for physicians. And then I think particularly for physician women and physician moms, you take all of that, and then you add into it the complexities of parenting that are just getting in some ways more and more complex as our world develops, right? As we have social media and, technology and just the societal pressures that are on our kids and then on us as moms. And so sort of trying to navigate all that. And sort of to what Tracy said, there's this, we're in this interesting era. So, our, the generation before us really fought very hard. Like our mother's generation fought very, very hard to break down barriers and glass ceilings. And then we sort of followed in it. And now we're raising, Tracy and I both have teenage daughters, and we're raising sort of that generation. And there's this sort of, we fought so hard to get here, and we sort of owe it to ourselves and our future to stay this very vigorous part of the workforce, and yet also this sort of like push of, but that doesn't always feel very aligned, and then there's pushback against that. And so there's just messages coming from every different direction. So I think what we see is overwhelm at work, with not enough support structure in place for physicians, that then it gushes into home, where these physician moms are still sort of carrying the whole load at home. They're even with incredible partners, or they're still generally the ones carrying sort of the managerial role at home, the sort of emotional pull at home, and so and trying to do it all well. So I think that sort of over demand, under supply, is really the biggest thing. But
Yeah, I think it's like literally running on fumes. And it's like you want to hit the reset button or the refresh button, but just in all that you're doing moment to moment, there's just not that space for sometimes, for the necessary rest and recharge.
Yeah. One of the things that I noticed working like pre-pandemic, through the pandemic, and after the pandemic with physicians is actually, and maybe it's also the change of technology. So it's sort of the pandemic plus technology. But during the pandemic, with everything really shifting to going virtual, patients' access to communication with physicians surged in a way it hadn't before. And these doctors are sort of buried in messages and charts, and they don't really have administrative time to deal with that. There's no structure in place, and it's getting exponentially worse. And so I've worked with women that set their alarm for 3:30 in the morning and, are charting and answering messages before their 6 a.m. workout, before they zip off to their, 7 a.m. OR time. And they're just buried, and the system hasn't really caught up with a way for them to deal with this level of communication, messages, charting. It just seems to be getting worse and worse and worse. And so many systems are not really run by physicians anymore. And so there's just such competing pulls there for, what's needed for these systems to thrive and what's needed for the humans actually in the systems to thrive.
Yeah.
It's a really tricky situation.
and I think there's also been a lot more isolation in medicine, even before the pandemic. Just the way systems were set up, there was a lot less time. We spent a lot more time at a computer, and there's so much information we can get about patients now that didn't exist in medicine 20, 50 years ago, right? And so
Yeah.
you spend so much more time there. There's so much less of like rounds with your colleagues, case conferences, like things that connected you to your patients, things that connected you to your staff, things that connected you, importantly, to other physicians, just sort of fell by the wayside as the demands increased. And then you hit the pandemic, and so many things moved to Zoom, including like meetings and, conferences and stuff, that people got really isolated, and that isolation never really fully recovered post-pandemic, even when things sort of went back into person. And there were a lot of good things that came out of it: accessibility, the ability to participate in conferences that you couldn't travel to, patients could get seen that couldn't come in, but there was a downside, and that downside I think we saw was really the social support aspect in medicine that really and a lot of our physician moms struggle with that on the personal side too. They feel like they don't have the connection at work that they used to have, but then also they will tell us, so I mean, we hear so many times like, it's really hard for me to feel like I can connect with the other moms at like school events or that kind of stuff, because they don't understand why I have to go home and chart at 9 o'clock at night, or why I can't just drop my OR schedule, or why I can't, like, they just don't understand. It's just, and I just can't connect and make friends, like other mom friends there. So they're feeling the isolation on both fronts.
Yeah, and in addition, it seems like a lot of people are describing, and I'm noticing in my own life, maybe they had, a Fourth of July barbecue every year, and they had a block party during Halloween, and all these things that used to happen that also don't happen since the pandemic, that a lot of people aren't coming back to that. So they're isolated in that way socially too, that there's just less and less of that. I also noticed in my own life with the change in technology so I have a 10-year gap, like I said, from my oldest to my youngest. And when my oldest was little, if I set up a play date with another child, the mom would come in, we'd have some coffee together, the kids would play and we would chat. And now it's like a text, we're here, and the child running in the door. And I don't even half the time see the other mom because everyone is so overloaded and
Yeah.
so busy and so crazy. And then technology makes it so easy to communicate, but not really communicate. And so I think people are isolated in every different way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's almost counterintuitive. It's on some level during the pandemic, what I saw with my children is it was their lifeline. The technology was a way to connect with others, but on another level, they become disconnected and collectively, the world as a whole on some level has become disconnected, and it can make us feel very alone, and it can compound what I think women who work in really high stress roles are feeling, that it intensifies that, like, I'm alone on this island, and it's like we're screaming for help. And on the other end, because we are so connected, because technology allows us to literally work all throughout the night, and as you mentioned, Tracy, like get up as early as we want, start charting. Getting back to what I said before, that space to recharge, if we don't intentionally disconnect, if we don't gain back the boundaries, like the physical boundaries that we once had, but that we have to intentionally create on like a virtual or a very real level. But if we don't create those boundaries for ourselves, then our work just keeps filtering through, and it can feel as if we're suffocating from the volume and the pace. I noticed that the last half of, well, the pandemic hit towards the second decade that I was working as a lawyer, but we always gave out our work line. We always had, of course, our email, but during the pandemic, we started to give out our cell phones, and it became very commonplace that it was at the bottom of our emails or even on the letterhead sometimes. And I noticed that throughout all hours of the day, if I wanted to, I could be at one of my son's sports games, or I could be out to dinner with my husband, and the work was just coming in. So I think that space, that like me space, to check in, to notice how you are, but then also that real connection, that community that you've both been speaking about, like that togetherness, that ability to get around the water cooler and talk about the weekend and talk about what's coming up in your life is really important. So I wanted to see if we could just explore what's often called the invisible load, and it shows up both at work and at home. And I'm curious to hear from you how it impacts both our mental and our emotional well-being.
Yeah, so I think so much of the fatigue that we see in the women is this load that they're carrying. And Juliette and I always say that our clients are all the CEOs of their family, whether they have, a wonderful, loving partner or they're a solo parent. Even some of our clients have stay-at-home husbands, spouses, and yet still it seems that all of them, 100% of them, are the structure. They seem to be the ones that know, when the doctor's appointment is due and when they've got to take the child to the orthodontist, and just sort of really understanding the whole everything that needs to be done. They're the calendar, they're the therapist, they're just sort of everything. And I think there's a fatigue that's associated with that. That's probably like the greatest compounding fatigue amongst all the other things causing the fatigue. And it really goes missed. And even, some of the women in dual physician full-time families that maybe have two au pairs and a lot of help, they still hold the load. They're still structuring what the help needs to do. There's no time that they actually get to just let down and breathe. And there's always a running list, in their brain. They get in the shower and it's going, going, going. They get out of the shower, they're jotting it down. It's just this constant. Yeah. And
Yeah, and I think it's ironic because sometimes the more sort of help or supportive spouse or, fully engaged co-parent they have, it's almost more invisible. So I think, I mean, it's incredibly hard for our like single moms. We have single moms by choice, we have divorced
Mhm.
moms, we have widowed moms, we work with, they're doing it all because there's literally nobody else to do it. They're doing it
Mhm.
all.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think for our moms who are in partnerships, even with a spouse who, like Tracy said, may be the stay-at-home parent, maybe somehow they are still the default sort of emotional carrier, organizational carrier. They're still the default parent in some way, but it's so much more of the invisible, right? Because that other person is there, like, they're like, oh, but your husband does the driving and does the grocery shopping and does the, or you have an au pair and they do all this stuff. You have help. And the invisible part is the part that is holding on to all of the structure, all of the emotional load, all of the details, all of everybody's well being, but it's not visible. It's not like, oh, but you did the laundry, right? It's not a visible task with a visible product, but it's never ending. It's just that
Mhm.
constant sort of hum always in the background. And I think it's very hard to describe. We talk a lot with people in their sort of relationships or with the people that help them. It's like, well, but I do XYZ tasks and you do XYZ tasks, and you make that list. And it's very hard to quantify and describe this sort of invisible emotional CEO role
Yeah.
in a way that people can do a more transactional conversation about it, because it just permeates everything
Hmm.
in their life and in the house. And it's not until it like goes away that people realize how much it is.
Yeah, I love how you both title it CEO because it very much is. And I say we should just have like capes on. Like we are
Yeah.
real life superheroes and we should just walk around with a cape that says CEO on the back of it. And to your point, both of you were saying like we do it all and we do it all well. When we do something, we often want it to be perfect. And I see that come up a lot in the programs that I teach, not only to women, but to men. We can be incredibly judgmental of ourselves. And when something falls short, even the slightest bit of how we think it should be or what we wanted it to turn out like, again, we sort of inflict more pain on ourselves and criticize ourselves for not doing things good enough. So how does that show up in the women that you work with? This idea of having to be perfect.
Yeah, well, I think one of the huge problems with perfect is that there is no such thing, and that almost always, if you're looking for the way that something is imperfect, you can find it. And
Mhm.
so if you're seeking the perfect way, there's just an endless amount of work, effort, improvement you can do. And so I think a lot of our people that we work with are constantly chasing perfect that doesn't exist, and it's very fatiguing. I think they also take on more because the nanny, their spouse, whomever will not do it as perfectly as they do, and so then they just end up doing it.
Yeah.
oftentimes it's even a little bit of a freeze response where they're so afraid they can't get it perfect that they're not doing it at all. And we notice that they're spending a lot of time sort of perfecting things mentally and not getting going. And when we can help them sort of reduce that perfectionism, it feels like found time. It's like, oh, accepting a little bit of B minus work as,
Yeah.
first of all, I always tell physicians, I'm like, your B minus is probably like an A minus
Uh-huh.
anyway.
Yeah.
But even if it wasn't, that like, who would you be if you could let this task, have a B minus? And
Mhm.
what would that open up for you in your life, in your heart, in your mind? How
Yeah.
how calm would you feel? And Juliet has a really good way of describing sort of why some of that perfectionism is there that I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, often what we find almost always is that the perfectionism is really a coping mechanism, a buffer against a
Mhm.
fear. And if there's this idea, if I can just get it perfect, then no bad outcome will happen, and I won't have to feel any bad feelings in the future, sadness, grief, guilt, regret. And so if I can just focus on getting it perfect now, I won't have to deal with a quote unquote bad outcome. And we see
Right.
that a ton in physicians. And unfortunately, medicine kind of, especially in sort of the litigious nature that happens sometimes, medicine kind of supports that, right? It's like you got to
Right.
think of everything and you got to get it. Otherwise, a bad outcome happens with a
Right.
patient. And then certainly we see that in them with their parenting a lot, right? If I can just get it perfect with this, then nothing bad will happen to my kid, right? They'll get
Mhm.
into the good
Mhm.
school, they'll have a good life, etc.
Right.
And really, when we can start to talk to them about A, that perfect doesn't exist, and but B, what is it really doing for them right now that it's trying to avoid? But the irony is that by trying to avoid a future negative feeling or distress, they're actually creating that negative feeling for them right now in
Mhm.
trying to seek perfection, right? They're
Right.
distressed now. And so we work on, sort of uncoupling those things for them a lot.
Yeah, I think that's great to be able to recognize those patterns, and if your clients can start to notice how that shows up, that they're worrying about what's to come, and how that's really very much, a visceral feeling. It's showing up right now. To let go of that and to know, Tracy, as you were saying, that there is no perfect. That B minus is okay. That's like when you said that, like I felt a weight be lifted off of my shoulders. As like I could take like a relaxing sigh, and it really took off a lot of the pressure. But I think that similar to what medical professionals are conditioned to believe in terms of it having to be perfect, or otherwise you may get slapped with a lawsuit. In some of the professionals that I work with in the legal sector, the same holds true. If they mess up a case,
Right.
they might get slapped with a malpractice suit. So there is such a rigidity around having to do everything perfect, and it really does carry its way into every facet of life. So whether it's in the professional world or in how we're raising our children. So to be able to see that and to let go a bit, like to not have to make every single thing be so perfect, but still very strong and good. I think that is really a gift that you can give to yourself. So we've spoken a bit in the episode so far about the power of community and knowing that you're not alone. And what I love that you both offer is group work. So I'm curious to know why groups matter so much in this season of life.
One of the things that I found when I was strictly doing one-on-one work in coaching, it kind of doesn't matter if your thinking is right or wrong, true or false. We're really trying to help people think intentionally so they can feel intentionally and then have intentional results.
Mhm.
And because we're sort of shepherding them in that direction, we don't tend to do a ton of validation of the way that they're currently looking at things, even though internally we're like nodding and, our hearts are feeling everything they're saying. We want to free them up if they're saying things are the worst, and they're able to think things aren't that bad. and that's possible for them. We don't want to do a ton of validating how awful things are, and really create this open space where they can look at things in a different way. But there was always, in that one-on-one, there was always that moment where I'm like, but I wish they knew that the way they're thinking is so human and so common, and that they're not alone. And so when we come together in group, what I love is they can get both. They can get this shared humanity piece of being with all these peers that are feeling the exact way and having such similar painful experiences. And then at the same time, I can help be the invitation for them to sort of move how they're looking at things to a way that feels more productive, because so often they can't change the circumstances exactly, that there's so many things at work that the only way they're going to feel better is looking at it slightly differently. And so I love that combination, that here they are feeling that shared humanity, feeling not alone, feeling not weird, feeling not like they have a dirty little secret, or that
Mhm.
I'm the only person that knows, but here's all these other women feeling the same, and they can grow and change together. So I think that's one piece that's extremely helpful in group. Another thing that Juliette and I talk about a lot is this concept of like passive coaching.
Mhm.
That sometimes if you're the one with the pain point and you're in a one-on-one session and you're really talking through something very difficult, your whole system is so charged that by the time you leave the session, hopefully you've got a couple of good nuggets, but you may feel like you didn't even take it all in because you were sort of having almost PTSD as you talked about what
Yeah.
was going on. But so often in group, you maybe have the exact same thing going on, but you're not the one talking about it acutely. And so you can kind of sit back and take in all the growth in this more passive way with this more kind of calm system, and really grow from another person. And maybe then the next day you're the one sharing, and they're growing from you. But um, there's also times that Juliette and I are able to say, you're hearing this story about this parent parenting the 3-year-old, but like if you have a 17-year-old, like this is how this shows up for you. And then we get all the nods,
Mhm.
and so just sort of connecting those pieces in a way can be a really beautiful experience.
I saw that I offered this past year for the Center for Mindfulness at Jefferson a mindful parenting class. It was just a workshop, and to your point, there were some people who had newborns,
Mhm.
some who had like we do teenagers, and even though the ages of their children were different, you would see all the smiling, the heads nodding, like because we're in it together, and we know that it's really challenging at times to juggle our role as mom, and if not everybody was a working professional, but again, just to hear what someone is struggling with and to be able to take that in and to know that there are others who feel just like I'm feeling is what can feel like a huge support piece. So thank you for sharing that. Can you tell us about maybe one example that you saw or one experience with regards to a transformation that you've witnessed in your community?
Yeah, I think, we've seen so many transformations and I think what we love about this community and the work we do is that it is it's sometimes in the professional arena, it's sometimes in the parenting arena, it's sometimes in the relationships arena, in family. We have a lot of women who are sort of in the same generation of us, of being like the sandwich generation. So they
Yeah.
have aging parents and kids. And, we've seen people with very similar circumstances and take very different paths, but still come to the end with a sense of sort of intentionality and peace and alignment. And it may be for one person that they switch jobs, and it may be for another person that they just started thinking about something differently and nothing switched in their
Mhm.
circumstance. Um, but the end result is that they created something in their lives that feels much better for
Yeah.
them. And I think we love to see that in a way that you can change your circumstances, but you can also change your thinking about things and really impact big changes. And so, we've had people do big big career shifts, big job shifts. We've had people had major changes in the relationship with their children. People decide to take a separation from a marriage. People decide to rekindle a marriage. People decide to, move a parent in with them. People decide to move a parent out of their house.
Yeah.
It's kind of remarkable. And then really seemingly not big things, right? Like nothing sort of on the surface of somebody's life changed, but they've had tremendous transformation during the time they've been in the program. And it's all been because of their own internal systems and their own internal work. They're more intentional about their boundaries. They're more intentional about their time. They're more aware of their nervous system and how they can regulate, and seemingly everything on the surface looks the same in their
Yeah.
life, right? They haven't changed jobs, moved, etc., but there's been tremendous profound transformation for them internally.
Yeah. I think that comes back to how you're relating to the circumstances in your life or the stressors in your world. I know for me that just being able to recognize that and then changing my relationship, that is what allowed me to stay in the game, so to speak, of the work I did as a litigator for another 10 years and to do it really well. It didn't mean having to find a different position, but just that inner work and that clear seeing is what can really be so nourishing. So I think it also is what helps us to realize that we're not broken, that there's not something wrong with us, that maybe it's just a matter of feeling overwhelmed and finding ways to deal with that. Have you noticed the shifts when the women who you work together with realize that they're not broken, that they're just overwhelmed? What have you noticed some type of shift in them?
One of the things I notice is they start to think of themselves as worthy. They start to put themselves onto the list of people who need to be taken care of. They start to allow themselves to plan the vacation they wanted to go on. They maybe buy themselves a gift for the holidays and not just everybody else. They refined their self-worth. They stop blaming themselves. They give themselves permission to say no to something for the kids and go exercise. And they say yes to more intentional management of their time. And I think just really increasing their self-worth allows them to be another person that they're caring for. And I think so many physicians start out with everybody's on their list but them.
Yeah.
I remember in my own life once setting the table for the family and realizing I had one less spot, and who did I forget? Myself. I didn't put a
Yeah.
plate out for myself,
Yeah.
And so I think our women are putting their plates out and maybe even putting theirs out first.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think also I think of it as like this sigh of relief. I almost like can hear them breathe out when they
Mhm.
realize that like this isn't them. There's not something fundamentally wrong with them. This is the circumstances, society, medicine, all the things, and they
Mhm.
sort of breathe and can think about it a little bit differently. And I think what's nice too in our community is that for some of them, our community is the place that one of the few places that they feel like they can really share these wins. Like they will come to this community before anybody else to share a win about something at work or something at home, or and they're like, I just knew you would get it. Like I knew, and
Yeah.
the women do, they show up, they're so excited to hear, somebody else share something. And so I think for some of them, it's one of the few spaces in their life that they have that, which is really lovely.
We do a
Yeah.
lot of teaching about self-compassion. And for a lot of our women, it's something they've never even thought about. They have no idea how to do it. I mean, we kind of start out with like, you are so kind in the way you relate and talk to everybody else. Like, what would that look like to turn internally? And they have no idea. We really kind of have to teach them. But I think once they get in the rhythm of it, they feel less invisible. It's like, oh, there's someone that sees me, and that person is me, So
Yeah.
that's
If you
beautiful to watch.
it's really beautiful to watch because I think 9 times out of 10, if you ask a working mom, if one of their children were to fall and scrape their knee. They would be so quick to run up to him or her and to say kind things, to give a loving touch or hug. And when it comes to ourselves, when we feel like we're struggling in some way or we fall down, we're so busy taking care of everyone else. And and the people that you deal with, literally, like they are caretakers. They're caring for their patients, they're caring for their children. And we put our own well-being and self-care on the back burner. But when we can put ourselves into the foreground and even the tiniest bit of self-compassion, it 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 really lights us up and it ripples out. So in turn, I think sometimes women can look at it as a bit selfish, that self time, that kindness, compassion. When we can dip our toe in it, and more, we realize that it's not selfish. It's actually a gift to ourselves. It makes us more resilient, and it allows us to connect that much fully, more fully with our loved ones, with our clients. So thank you for voicing that. If somebody is listening and is curious to learn more about your company, Physician Life Booster, can you talk a bit about who it's designed for and maybe a bit about what makes your membership different than other resources that are out there?
Yeah. So it is designed for physician women. It is all physician women. And part of what makes it different and was very intentional in the design of it when we were thinking about how we wanted to be in this space and what we wanted to do was we really thought about sort of where there was a need in this space to really meet women where they were and make it accessible. And so the way our membership is structured is that it's flexible and affordable enough that it can sort of fit in your life and be ongoing instead of being sort of a more intensive, high price program that lasts for a specific amount of time. And then you sort of delve a bunch of time and money into it but then it sort of comes to an end and it's like, what do I do now?
Right.
We really wanted this coaching and community to be something that women could have in their life ongoing. And so the it sort of, we always joke, it's like just what you need and no more. And so it's sort of flexible in how it fits into your schedule, but it's real time, it's real small group coaching, it's not recorded webinars, it's us, you get us, and you get your community every time. But it really sort of can work around your schedule, your life needs, and in a way that feels pretty accessible. And so that was really our mission in creating this structure, and continuing to evolve it, as we grow more. But and if women are interested, our website is physicianlifebooster.com, all one word. And there's we have a email list with a weekly email that we send out called the Weekly Boost, that just has like some sort of tips and wisdom and just to sort of help living life easier, and a guide on how to set boundaries with more peace and kindness, in a way that feels more aligned. And then they can check out much more about us and the program, and the membership on the website. And then we also are soon to be releasing our podcast called Physician Daily Booster, which will be a daily small bites, 5 minutes or less a day podcast with just little tips, pearls, things to get your day started. You can listen in the car while you're drinking your coffee. And so that's, stay tuned, but coming soon.
Yes, and we're always happy to meet with somebody individually to talk more about the program. On our website, you can reach us at info@physicianlifebooster.com, and we will personally get back to you. And we're always happy to meet and have a conversation where we go into more of the details of, the times we meet and how it works. So we're very accessible and just love to talk to women, and sometimes they even get what they need on that call. So.
And I'll make sure to put all the information in the show notes so that listeners, viewers, you can just click and you'll be able to connect with Tracy and Juliette. And I was going to ask you, for women who are feeling a bit overwhelmed in juggling work and motherhood, I love that you make everything accessible. I heard a few times today flexibility, which I think is so spot on for the busy, overwhelmed working mom. And these 5-minute tidbits, what we often say with mindfulness practice is, you don't have to have marathon long sessions, because if we look at it that way, we're going to turn our heads to it because our plates are so full. But to have these small doses, or glimpses many times, that really does add up in a profound way. So I'm excited to keep an eye out for that, and congratulations on that to come. Before we end our time together today, I wanted to ask what you would most want a physician mom listening today to know or to hear from you.
I think, gosh, so many things. I often start any kind of parenting group by saying you're the perfect mom for your child. So just start out knowing that your thoughts are correct, your gut is correct. And I think we talked a lot about brokenness today. You're not broken. Put yourself on the list. What else,
Sure to
Juliet?
make sure to put a place setting for yourself, right?
Your own plan. Yeah, I would say that you're not alone. You're not alone in this at all, and that it can get better. That it can feel better even without the circumstances changing.
Yeah.
Powerful. Well, thank you. Thank you both. I know that I benefited from just hearing that. And there was a little bit of judging today as I realized I didn't pack, I left something out from my son's bag, and there, there was the judgmental mom in me. So I needed to hear that. Thanks, Tracy. And thank you both for your time and for everything you shared with us today. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to following your work and learning more from you both.
Thank you
Thank
for
you so
having
much,
us.
Courtney.
My pleasure. Take care.
You too.